Hello class, welcome to week 6 of course. Dr. Nemechek here. We are now going to be looking at part 7 of the textbook, which deals with chapters 18, 19, and 20. Looking back at what you guys did last week in week 5 for chapters 14, 15, 16, and 17. Thank you again for some very engaged discussions in the discussion board and the work that you turned in. I think everybody, as far as the assignments goes, is grasping the concept. Many of you don't have the exact numbers and figures that may have been anticipated for use with some of these assignments, but given that there are a lot of things that can be made up for these assignments relative to, for example, I believe it was last week where you were able to actually make up what you thought the particular hospital was going to be making on the use of equipment relative to the income it was going to be bringing in. That was the type of information that was left up to your own device. So a lot of the instruction that you get is kind of open-ended and these exercises, and it leaves it to your imagination. But again, in looking at the tables and the spreadsheets that you submitted, looks like everybody's grasping the concept. And again, that's the ultimate goal of this course at this level, is to not make you bean counters, but to make sure that you understand terminology and definitions. So in part 7, in week 6 of the book, we're going to take a look at, in chapter 18, what is referred to as variance analysis and sensitivity analysis. And your 4 learning objectives in that chapter are going to be: make sure you understand the 3 types of flexible budget variances, perform budget variance, and by looking at some of the examples that they give you. Again, don't get wrapped around the axle on all of the different formulas that they show you, but just take a look at how they've got it laid out and try to get a basic understanding of why they do it the way that they do. Because again, most of you are going to have people that do this type of information for you, this type of numbers crunching, so it's not necessary that you learn how to do those computations. You should have an understanding of how to compute a contribution margin and be able to perform sensitivity analysis. Now again, when we're talking about variance analysis and sensitivity analysis, basically the difference between the standard and actual prices and quantities of things is what we're talking about. And in variance analysis, this is where we analyze these differences. This type of discussion will assume a flexible budget is being prepared by your organization in accordance with the steps described in the chapters about budgeting. So therefore, flexible budgeting, variance analysis can be conceived by industry and subsequently discovered by healthcare in the same realm. It provides a method to get more information about the composition of departmental expenses. And so what you're doing is taking a look at why costs in an organization vary the way that they do from division to division to department, and trying to figure out why those do occur. Now again, and having just a basic understanding of why this is done from an accounting standpoint of view is something that you don't really want to get into much detail about, other than to understand the definitions. So as you go through this chapter, again, as I have suggested in previous chapters, focus on the end of the chapter where they show you how to do a contribution margin. Understand the contribution margin method. There's a formula that's listed there at the bottom of page 219 that shows you what that conversion is, and it even gives you the definitions of what it is that you're supposed to put in there, so you can understand what they're doing. Then if you turn over to page 222, the last page of that chapter, become familiar with the information checklist, the key terms, and the discussion questions that they've got listed there for you. Now that takes us to chapter 19, which is just to follow on to that same discussion, and it has to do with benchmarking, making estimates, doing benchmarking, and other measurement tools. Now to some people, the term benchmarking is a strange terminology because they really have no idea what it is to what we're saying. We're talking about benchmarking. And for those of you who have done any kind of home repair projects or worked on a workbench in your garage or had your father teach you some of these things, benchmarking is where you put, let's say for example, a piece of wood on a workbench and you want to make it that particular piece of wood a certain size. Well, what they used to do is they would take before we had any kind of specific measuring devices like we do today in tape measures or wooden rules, people would mark on a bench. They would go and they would take a piece of wood and they would mark that piece of wood relative to the length that they wanted to make it to fit into a particular place. And they would draw with a pencil what the size of that particular item was that they wanted to use as their template for cutting something. They would then take that information to the workbench. They were going to cut their wood. They would set it down and take another piece of wood, lay it on top of it, and from that benchmark that they had made there on that other piece of wood, they would also mark that other piece of wood, and they could cut it to the same size. So essentially that's what the term benchmarking comes from, and that's how it applies in the financial sense in that when you are benchmarking information, you're trying to establish a norm. You're trying to establish why something cost something previously that you want to find out what it's going to cost today or tomorrow. So you're going to benchmark that information. And the way that you're going to do that is by learning how to estimate things. You're going to learn how to estimate the amount of something, the value of something, and the size of something in this chapter. And so spend some time understanding the 4 common uses of estimates, how to estimate ending inventory specifically, because in a healthcare organization, that's what they're interested in keeping track of.
Microsoft Outlook needs your attention.
Also, be able to understand the concept of financial benchmarking, which I just defined for you. Understand the use of the Pareto rule and compute quartiles for measurement purposes. And again, there are not a whole lot of tools used in this particular chapter, except for some of the tables and exhibits that they show you. There aren't a lot of figures that will demonstrate how to compute things, but they give you more definitions more than anything, which is really helpful for this particular chapter. So by the time you get to the end of the chapter on page 231, focus on the information checklist, the key terms, and of course the discussion questions on page 232. And that will take us to chapter 20, our last chapter for this week, Understand the Impact of Data Analytics and Big Data. Now, a lot of you are saying, well, what does being able to analyze big data have to do with finance? Well, financial information is in fact data, just like any other kind of information that you collect in a healthcare organization. So in order to be able to analyze it, you have to understand that it does have an impact on the operations of the organization. And so you have to be able to define what data is relative to financial information, and then determine how you can analyze that. So that's what this chapter is going to be all about. They're going to define for you what is big data and how you, what the term data mining means. In other words, how you can go into some of the information systems in your organization, and by use of doing queries, you can find out when you know how to use the systems in your organization, how to manipulate those tools that you've got available to you so you can mine the data that's there to find out the financial information that you want. So you should be able to recognize the differences amongst different types of data that existed, whether it's retrospective, meaning in the past, predictive, which means that it's something we are predicting for the future, or prospective analytics, which are things that are just guesses as to what might have happened in the past or today or in the future. So a lot of good information in chapter 20, and again, this one is really more for definition. There's not a lot of numbers crunching in this chapter. It's very easy to read, very short. Focus on the information checkpoint, the big terms at the end of the chapter, as well as the discussion questions, and I think that you'll have a good flavor for our week 6 information. So, in closing, read chapters 18, 19, and 20. Review the PowerPoint slide presentations that I have embedded in the course for you on those 3 chapters. Participate in our week 6 discussion board, and complete your week 6 assignment, the details of which are at the end of the course syllabus. And of course, you do have one more week 6 quiz that will bring you full circle on this information. Next week, we will be going into week 7, actually the last week of the course, so we're getting very close to finishing up, where we're going to review part 8 of the textbook, and we're going to talk about chapters 21, 22, and 23. And that essentially is going to close out the textbook because there are many more chapters after that, but since the confines of the course and keeping this to a 7.5 week duration, 8-week course, We only had time to go over this bit of information. But knowing that you have invested big bucks in this particular textbook, it might be worthwhile taking a look at the other chapters, because when I set out to organize this course for you, I focused on these first 23 chapters as being the most important for you that we could get to throughout the course. So if you have any questions, send an email or give me a phone call, and if not, I'll see you next week. Bye.